Hallo Leute, ich bin Katja und ihr seht Deutsch für euch. As I promised, we're going to take a look at conjunctions today, and I will actually have to correct myself because I looked into it a little bit and turns out we can actually cover all conjunctions that there are today. Now don't get scared, that obviously means there aren't as many as I anticipated. There is a reason for that, which I will mention at the end of the episode, but for now, let's just get to the conjunctions. So firstly, we will check out the conjunctions that connect two things of a kind, which means two main clauses to each other, two subordinate clauses to each other, or two words or two segments to each other. The two most important ones here obviously are und, and, oder, or. These two are the only conjunctions that don't cause for a comma to stand between them and whatever comes before them. For every other conjunction, no matter if the order of words after it is that of a main clause or that of a subordinate clause, always needs a comma before it. Not as confusing as in English. Aber. But. Aber. Not much to add, just one thing. This is not used to contrast two things or situations or whatever, but only to raise objections or to express that something changed or didn't fall into place the way that it should have. Wollte Wasser trinken, aber die Küche war abgeschlossen. Denn. Because. Denn. There is more than one way to say because in German, like in English. Denn is normally only used in written speech. But I've heard it used in sentences and it was not used as a conjunction. Aha! You've encountered one of our many filler adverbs. We're going to get to them in the future. I don't want to talk about them today, but I am aware that these cause a lot of frustration. For now, remember these two things. The nice thing about denn is that there is a form of it that is mostly encountered in written language and one that is mostly encountered in spoken language. The one encountered in written language is normally the conjunction, which you won't really find in spoken language unless you're speaking to a very posh person. And that means the other way around, the denn that you will mostly encounter in spoken language is the filler adverb, which means that, nicely enough, most of the time you can just ignore it. So I wouldn't advise you to use denn in spoken language, at least not as a conjunction, but I would recommend that you use it in written language as often as possible, because it's better style than the other alternative for because that we will talk about later. Sondern. But. Sondern. Wait, but we already had but. Yeah, this is the other form. Meaning that this is the but in the sense of not this, but this. And that's pretty much it. That's the only thing that you use it for. So only used if you want to point out that you meant or want to say or whatever something different than something aforementioned or implied. You will encounter it a lot for connecting segments, like here. Ich will kein Wasser, sondern Schokolade. Not to say that it's not used for connecting sentences. Remember this sentence from earlier? This is not used to contrast two things or situations or whatever, but only to raise objections or to express that something changed or didn't fall into place the way that it should have. In German that would be, das wird nicht benutzt, um Sachen zu kontrastieren, sondern nur um zu widersprechen oder um auszudrücken, dass sich etwas geändert oder nicht funktioniert hat. So to use sondern, you need to be able to imagine something like, this didn't happen or isn't going on. Instead, this happened or this is going on. Entweder oder. Exactly the same as either or. Entweder du kommst jetzt her oder ich werde böse. Außerdem. Also or besides. Außerdem. Do not get this confused with also. That means so, okay? Also is not also. Never. Ich will nichts trinken. Außerdem ist die Küche abgeschlossen. There is also doch, which means yet or however, or can also often be translated as but it's only used in written speech, so I don't really want to waste more time on that. Now let's go to conjunctions that connect a Hauptsatz to a Nebensatz. So meaning that the part of the sentence that comes after the conjunction follows the order of words for subordinate clauses. Als. When. Als. Sie wollte gehen, als er sie rief. meaning that we use it when we want to express that something was going on when something else happened, to interrupt it or whatever. It's also used for telling stuff, like, remember when we did this? So that means it's really only used for telling things. So, meaning the things that it is not used for, that when is used for. You do not use als to ask for the time. That is wann. And also, we do not use it to talk about a certain point of time now or in the future. For example, when I come home. For that, we use wenn. So this is our point in time when. Wenn. Not w, the. V. Wenn. Wenn. Wenn ich nach Hause komme, trinke ich Wasser. Another thing to watch out for here is that we can also use wenn to say if. Wenn ich den Job kriege, bin ich glücklich. But to say if, we can also use falls. If. Falls. This sounds a bit more doubtful, but in most cases, wenn and falls are interchangeable. When, of course, when talking about if. So, falls ich den Job kriege, bin ich glücklich. Weil. Or the way to say because. Weil. It's also the one that you will see used in spoken language 90% of the time. Nowadays, you will often hear people use the main clause structure of words after it. That is wrong. I guess it came out of the urge to form another, at least structural main clause, because you're making another statement and it sounds too important to be put into a subordinate clause, but people didn't want to use den because at some point that became old-fashioned or written language. Funnily enough, though, out of the awareness that this is wrong, even though many people use it, most will make a small pause after weil and then put the rest of the sentence after it. So the correct version of our next sentence would be, Sie geht in die Küche, weil sie durstig ist. But you might hear people say this, Sie geht in die Küche, weil sie ist durstig. Don't use that though, because you might fall into this trap. While many people do this, most of them will most of the time only do this after a main clause. Now, normally, in written language, you always need a main clause before a subordinate clause. But, as you know, in spoken language, often we have this scenario where, for example, somebody asks somebody else a question, and instead of forming an entire sentence because that takes too long, you just reply with a fitting subordinate clause. So in that scenario, most people will keep the subordinate order of words when using weil. So you would sound really off using the main clause structure here. Example, warum geht sie in die Küche? Na, weil sie durstig ist. So just don't use the main clause structure after weil in general. It's wrong. All of these following ones are used in both written and spoken language. Bevor, before, bevor. Obwohl, even though. Obwohl, bis, until, bis. Nachdem, after, nachdem. Damit, so that, damit. Seit, since, but only in its temporal meaning, so like in it's been years since we've seen each other. Seit. Also, seitdem, which is since, a mentioned or implied point of time. So for example, vor 5 Jahren haben wir uns getroffen. Seitdem habe ich ihn nicht gesehen. Während, both meanings of while, so that can be used for both I sing while you listen, and I can sing while you can't. Während. And then we have two less important ones, but I'll mention them anyway because they are the only two ones left. Ehe, a more poetic way to say before. Ehe. Also, when spelt with a capital first letter, and therefore as a noun, this means marriage. Those two obviously don't have anything to do with each other though. Da. Since, but this time the causal meaning. So, I can't marry you since I'm in love with somebody else. Do not confuse it with there. That also means da, but it's not a conjunction. There are more words that are used like conjunctions, but in reality are adverbs, so I would rather do their own episode. Another reason is that there are way too many of those to fit into this episode, and I feel like you already have plenty, and yeah, with these you already know all actual conjunctions that German has. The only ones that you don't know are the two-part ones, so things like either or. No, wait, we actually did either or. So neither nor is missing, and you know, other things like that. We haven't done those yet. I might do an additional episode on solely them, or I don't know, I'll fit them in somewhere. But for now, that is it for today. Your random word of the week is die Jacke. Bis nächste Woche. Tschüss!